Vanessa was a young, vibrant university student with dreams that reached far beyond the walls of her small dorm room. A final-year student majoring in economics, she had always believed education was the only way to escape the vicious cycle of poverty her family had endured for generations. Her widowed mother worked tirelessly as a street vendor back in their village, but the little money she sent home barely covered her siblings' school fees, leaving Vanessa to fend for herself in the city. Her once bright spirit was now dulled by the weight of her financial burdens. Vanessa owed several months of tuition fees, rent, and even the cafeteria owner who had stopped allowing her to buy on credit. She had tried everything, borrowing from friends, working part-time jobs, but the money she made wasn't nearly enough. Her desperation grew by the day, and her mind began to wander into darker places. One evening, Vanessa sat in her tiny room, staring blankly at her laptop. A message popped up from an online forum she had joined weeks ago, a place where struggling students discussed ways to make money. Scrolling through, she noticed someone had posted about unconventional opportunities for quick cash. Out of sheer curiosity, she clicked on the thread. The responses ranged from escorting wealthy men to shady business deals. Vanessa felt a pang of disgust but couldn't deny the temptation of quick money. Among the replies was one that caught her attention: rich businessman looking for an open-minded girl. Payment guaranteed, but terms must be kept private. Serious inquiries only. Attached was a phone number. For hours, Vanessa stared at her phone, battling an internal war between her moral compass and the crushing reality of her debts. Eventually, she gave in. Hesitantly, she dialed the number. The man on the other end of the line introduced himself as Mr. Carter. His deep, smooth voice exuded wealth and confidence. He told Vanessa he was looking for someone willing to fulfill a unique request, promising a life-changing amount of money in return. When Vanessa asked what the request was, he chuckled and said they needed to meet in person to discuss further. The next day, Vanessa found herself sitting across from Mr. Carter in a luxurious hotel suite. He was an older man, perhaps in his early 50s, with sharp features and an air of authority. The room smelled of expensive cologne and leather. He offered her a drink, which she politely declined. "Vanessa," he began, leaning back in his chair, "I won't waste your time. I'm a man who values discretion, and I'm willing to pay generously for it. What I'm about to propose may sound unusual, but rest assured, the reward will be worth it." Vanessa's heart raced as he continued. "I have a dog, a rare breed that I cherish. I'm looking for someone to entertain it for a night. If you agree, I'll transfer $50,000 to your account immediately after." She froze, her mind struggling to process his words. At first, she thought she had misheard him. "You want me to sleep with your dog?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Yes," he replied, unflinching. "It's a simple transaction. No strings attached. You'll be doing me a favor, and I'll make sure you're compensated handsomely." Revulsion surged through her, but so did the memory of her unpaid bills and the eviction notice pinned to her door. $50,000 was more money than she could imagine. It would cover her tuition, rent, and even help her mother back home. "I need time to think," she said, her voice barely audible. Mr. Carter nodded. "Take your time. But remember, opportunities like this don't come often. Call me when you've made your decision." Vanessa left the hotel feeling sick to her stomach. The moral dilemma tore her apart. She spent the next 3 days locked in her room, crying, praying, and weighing her options. She even considered dropping out of school, but the thought of disappointing her mother crushed her. On the 4th day, Vanessa called Mr. Carter. Her voice was shaky but resolute. "I'll do it," she said, hating herself with every word. "Excellent," he replied, his tone smug. "Meet me at the same hotel tomorrow night. I'll have everything prepared." The following evening, Vanessa arrived at the hotel, her heart pounding in her chest. Mr. Carter greeted her with a warm smile and led her to a dimly lit room where a large dog sat on a plush bed. Vanessa's legs felt like jelly as she approached the animal, tears streaming down her face. Before she could back out, Mr. Carter handed her a glass of wine. "This will help calm your nerves," he said. Reluctantly, she took a sip, then another, until the room began to spin, and she felt a heavy fog settle over her mind. What happened next was a blur, a horrifying nightmare she wished she could forget. When it was over, Vanessa stumbled out of the hotel, clutching a receipt from her bank showing the promised $50,000. The money felt like blood on her hands, but she told herself it was all for survival. Days turned into weeks, and Vanessa tried to move on, burying herself in her studies. But the shame and guilt clung to her like a shadow, eating away at her sanity. She avoided her friends, ignored her mother's calls, and sank deeper into isolation. One evening, while walking back from class, Vanessa saw Mr. Carter's car parked outside her dorm. Panic set in as he rolled down the window and smiled. "Vanessa, my dear. I have another proposition for you," he said. This time, she couldn't run. She knew she had stepped into a world she might never escape. Vanessa froze, staring at Mr. Carter's sleek black car. Her heart pounded in her chest as his smooth voice echoed in her ears, beckoning her closer. She wanted to turn and run, but her legs felt like they were cemented to the ground. Slowly, she walked toward the car, her mind racing with dread and self-loathing. When she reached the car, Mr. Carter gestured for her to get in. "We need to talk," he said, his voice calm but firm. Reluctantly, Vanessa opened the door and slid into the passenger seat. The interior smelled of leather and wealth, a stark contrast to the suffocating guilt that lingered in her chest. "Vanessa," he began, turning to face her. "I must say, you impressed me with your courage. Not many would do what you did, and I respect that. That's why I have another opportunity for you." She clenched her fists, barely able to meet his gaze. "Mr. Carter, I don't think I can." He raised a hand to silence her. "Hear me out first. This isn't about the dog. It's different. I have a circle of acquaintances, wealthy individuals who enjoy certain entertainments. They're willing to pay handsomely for someone with your discretion and willingness. Think of it as a high-stakes investment. You could walk away with enough money to never worry about your finances again." Vanessa's stomach churned. She wanted to scream at him, to tell him how much she hated herself for what she'd already done, but the words wouldn't come. The $50,000 had solved her immediate problems, but the emotional toll was far greater than she had anticipated. "I don't think I can do this anymore," she whispered, her voice shaking. Mr. Carter leaned closer, his eyes piercing. "Vanessa, I understand your hesitation, but think about your future. Your debts, your family, this is your chance to secure everything you've ever wanted. Don't let emotions cloud your judgment." His words lingered in her mind long after he drove away, leaving her alone in the dark. That night, Vanessa couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, replaying his offer over and over. The thought of facing her mother with her shame was unbearable, but the promise of financial freedom was intoxicating. The next morning, Vanessa sat in the university library, scrolling through job listings and scholarship opportunities. Nothing seemed promising. The desperation she had tried to bury resurfaced, and she found herself dialing Mr. Carter's number once again. "Have you made a decision?" he asked when he answered. Vanessa hesitated, her voice barely audible. What do I have to do?" Mr. Carter's tone lightened. "That's the spirit, my dear. Meet me tomorrow evening at the same hotel. I'll explain everything." The next evening, Vanessa found herself back in the luxurious suite. This time, Mr. Carter was not alone. A middle-aged woman dressed in a tailored business suit sat beside him, her sharp eyes assessing Vanessa like a commodity. "This is Ms. Brooks," Mr. Carter said, introducing the woman. "She handles arrangements for our clientele. She'll brief you on the details." Ms. Brooks handed Vanessa a folder containing a confidentiality agreement and a detailed list of expectations. "This is a high-end arrangement," she explained. "You'll be attending exclusive events, mingling with influential individuals. Discretion and compliance are non-negotiable. You'll be compensated generously for your time." Vanessa's hands trembled as she flipped through the documents. The terms were clear. She would be required to entertain clients in ways that went beyond mere conversation. Her mind screamed at her to leave, but the sight of the staggering figures under the compensation section left her paralyzed. "Think it over," Ms. Brooks said, standing to leave. "But don't take too long. Opportunities like this don't wait." After they left, Vanessa sat alone in the suite, staring at the contract. The money would change her life, but at what cost? She felt like she was teetering on the edge of a precipice, unsure whether to leap or retreat. That night, she called her best friend, Clara, someone she hadn't confided in for months. "Clara, I don't know what to do," she sobbed, explaining everything in a rush of tears and broken sentences. Clara was horrified. "Vanessa, you can't keep doing this. You're better than this. We'll figure something out together, I promise. Please don't let these people drag you deeper into their world." But Vanessa couldn't see a way out. The next day, she signed the agreement, sealing her fate. Weeks turned into months as Vanessa navigated the treacherous waters of her new life. She attended lavish parties, wore designer dresses, and rubbed shoulders with the elite. On the surface, she appeared confident and composed, but inside, she was drowning in guilt and self-hatred. One evening, as she sat alone in her dorm room counting the money she had earned, there was a knock at her door. It was Clara, her eyes filled with concern. "Vanessa, I can't stand by and watch you destroy yourself," Clara said. "You need to stop this before it's too late." Vanessa broke down, confessing everything. "I don't know who I am anymore, Clara. I'm trapped. Even if I want to leave, they won't let me." Clara placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Then we'll find a way to fight back. You're not alone in this." For the first time in months, Vanessa felt a glimmer of hope. But she knew escaping Mr. Carter's world wouldn't be easy, and the consequences could be deadly. Vanessa sat on the edge of her bed, her head buried in her hands. Clara paced the small dorm room, her mind racing as she tried to come up with a plan to help her friend escape the nightmare she was entangled in. "We can go to the police," Clara suggested, her voice firm. Vanessa looked up, her face pale. "And say what?" "That I willingly signed a contract. That I agreed to everything." "Clara, they'll never believe I was desperate. They'll paint me as a willing participant." Clara paused, realizing the complexity of the situation. "Then what? You're just going to keep letting these people use you?" "Vanessa, you're better than this. You don't have to let them control you." Vanessa shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "It's not that simple. Mr. Carter, he knows things about me. He has recordings, proof of what I've done. If I try to back out or expose him, he'll ruin me. My family, my life, everything will be destroyed." Clara sat down beside her, gripping her hands tightly. "We'll figure this out, Vanessa. I promise. But you can't do this alone anymore. Let me help you." Vanessa nodded weakly, though deep down, she doubted there was a way out. The next day, Vanessa received a text from Mr. Carter. "We need to meet. Tonight. Same hotel." Her stomach twisted into knots as she stared at the message. She hadn't been called in weeks, and she had hoped she was being phased out. Now, fear gripped her as she considered what new horrors awaited. Clara insisted on accompanying her, staying nearby in case anything went wrong. "If you're not out in an hour, I'm calling the police," Clara warned as she dropped Vanessa off at the hotel. Vanessa entered the suite to find Mr. Carter seated in a leather chair, sipping a glass of wine. His calm demeanor unnerved her even more. "Vanessa, my dear," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "You've been doing well. My associates have nothing but praise for you. But I have a new opportunity, something more exclusive." Her throat tightened. "What do you mean?" Mr. Carter leaned forward, his piercing eyes locking onto hers. There's a client. A very wealthy and influential man. He's willing to pay an extraordinary amount for your company. One night, Vanessa. And you'll walk away with enough money to never worry about your future again. Vanessa's skin crawled. She had heard rumors of such exclusive clients, and the thought terrified her. How much? She whispered, hating herself for even asking. $500,000, he replied, his voice dripping with confidence. All up front, wired to your account before the night is over. Her heart pounded in her chest. The amount was staggering, enough to pay off her debts, help her family, and start anew. But the cost of her dignity, her soul, felt immeasurable. I need time to think, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Carter's expression hardened. You don't have time, Vanessa. The client is leaving the country tomorrow. This is a one-time offer. Panic set in as she realized how trapped she was. I'll do it, she said, the words tasting like poison. Vanessa left the hotel that night with a sense of finality, as if a piece of her soul had been permanently stripped away. Clara was waiting for her in the car, her face etched with worry. What happened? Clara asked. Vanessa shook her head, unable to speak. She handed Clara her phone, showing her the transfer confirmation for $500,000. Clara's eyes widened in shock. Vanessa, what did you do? Tears streamed down Vanessa's face as she recounted Mr. Carter's offer and her reluctant agreement. Clara's initial shock turned to anger. This has to stop, Clara said firmly. We need to find a way to expose him and his entire operation. He can't keep doing this to you, or anyone else. Vanessa wiped her tears, a glimmer of determination flickering in her eyes. But how? He has connections, power. If we make one wrong move, he'll destroy us. Clara leaned closer, her voice steady. We start small. Gather evidence. Record everything. And when we have enough, we'll take it to someone who can help, someone he can't bribe or threaten. For the first time in months, Vanessa felt a spark of hope. It wouldn't be easy, but with Clara by her side, she realized she wasn't alone in her fight. As the two friends began to devise their plan, Vanessa knew that the road ahead would be dangerous. But she also knew that she couldn't let Mr. Carter, or anyone like him, control her life any longer. Vanessa sat in her dorm room with Clara, their plan meticulously laid out on sheets of paper scattered across the bed. It was risky, but they knew it was their only chance to bring Mr. Carter's dark world crashing down. Vanessa had decided to turn the guilt and despair that consumed her into fuel for justice. Clara had reached out to her cousin, Jacob, a journalist known for his exposés on corruption and exploitation. When they explained Vanessa's situation, Jacob agreed to help, emphasizing the importance of gathering concrete evidence. We'll need everything, he said. Recordings, messages, anything that ties him to this network. Vanessa received another text from Mr. Carter a week later. This time, the tone was colder. Meet me tomorrow. A new client wants you. She stared at the message, her hands trembling. Clara squeezed her shoulder. This is it. We'll record everything. With Jacob's help, they set up a hidden camera in Vanessa's bag and a recording device disguised as a pen. Clara would be parked outside the hotel, ready to call for help if things escalated. The next evening, Vanessa walked into the hotel suite, her heart pounding. Mr. Carter was there, as usual, with his smug smile. You've been a valuable asset, Vanessa. Tonight's client is special, so don't disappoint me. She nodded, her face carefully neutral. As he spoke, she subtly adjusted her bag to ensure the camera had a clear view. The client arrived soon after, a middle-aged man with a stern expression. Vanessa's stomach churned as she realized how far this network extended. She played her part, asking questions to keep them talking while capturing everything on camera. When Mr. Carter left the room briefly, Vanessa made her move. I can't do this anymore, she said, her voice trembling. The man raised an eyebrow. You've already agreed. Backing out now would be unwise. Vanessa leaned forward, lowering her voice. Do you even know what kind of operation this is? They record everything. They'll use it against you if you ever cross them. The man hesitated, doubt flickering across his face. It was enough to plant a seed of fear. After leaving the hotel, Vanessa handed the footage to Jacob. He spent days analyzing it, compiling a damning report that detailed Mr. Carter's network, his clients, and the exploitation of young women. With the evidence in hand, Jacob approached a trusted law enforcement officer who had worked on similar cases. Together, they planned a coordinated raid on Mr. Carter's properties. On the day of the raid, Vanessa waited anxiously in Clara's apartment, watching the news. Hours later, the headline flashed across the screen. Human trafficking ring busted, high-profile businessman arrested. Tears streamed down her face as she saw Mr. Carter being led away in handcuffs. Clara hugged her tightly. It's over, Vanessa. You did it. The investigation revealed dozens of victims, many of whom came forward to share their stories. Vanessa's testimony was instrumental in securing convictions for Mr. Carter and his associates. With the money she had earned, Vanessa paid off her debts and donated a significant portion to organizations that supported survivors of exploitation. She also enrolled in therapy, determined to heal from the trauma she had endured. Months later, Vanessa stood before a packed auditorium at her university, sharing her story during a seminar on combating human trafficking. Desperation led me down a dark path, she said, her voice steady. But I've learned that we are stronger when we fight together. No one deserves to feel trapped or powerless. As she looked out at the audience, Vanessa spotted Clara and Jacob in the front row, their faces beaming with pride. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace. Vanessa knew she couldn't erase the past, but she was determined to use her experience to help others avoid the same mistakes. Her journey wasn't just about survival, it was about reclaiming her life and turning her pain into purpose.